Hi YouTube. So first up I want to issue a public apology to Atticana. After discussing my last video with a couple of my closest friends, and therefore my strongest critics, they have convinced me that I crossed the line with my personal attacks against you, and they were uncalled for and detracted from the points I was trying to make. So I do sincerely wish to apologize. Now to address the issues raised in your response. Firstly, you say that I didn't acknowledge your correction video regarding first versus last common ancestry. This is not true. I posted a link to your correction video in the sidebar, and I'll post it up again for my viewers to go see, and I recommend they do go see it, because it's not so much an admission of error on your behalf, but instead you blame atheist scientists for deliberately trying to confuse you. Secondly, you tried to make the point that first versus last isn't relevant to the points you're making, which just isn't true. And regardless, you challenged me to make a video refuting your claims, so that's what I did. Now, the main point of your video, as far as I can tell, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, is that atheist scientists are trying to undermine the Bible by using the names Adam and Eve to refer to our last common ancestors, and that these atheist scientists are failing to do so because those common ancestors must have had their own ancestors, which, in your opinion, would be the real Adam and Eve. Now that's the basis of the argument, right? Well, let's just address that, shall we? Firstly, no, using the names Adam and Eve is not an attempt to undermine the Bible. They're simply two recognizable names from Christian mythology given to two individuals that all humans alive today can trace their ancestry back to, not unlike the mythical Adam and Eve. These last common ancestors were real people with real lives and probably had real names of their own, names like Crag and Dogrella. I don't know, but since they were real humans and real individuals, they were given real names by the scientists studying them. Names taken from mythology to recognize the fact that we are all descended from them. Now, just out of curiosity, what would you have called them? Fred and Wilma?
He then goes on to say that science does not set out to attack religion. But I never said that it did. What I actually said was that atheist scientists attack religion, which of course they do.
Okay, you have a point here. There are plenty of atheists that use scientific evidence to disprove dogma, such as myself. But let me ask you something. If scientific facts falsify religious doctrine, is it wrong to point that out? If evidence is found that disprove religious misconceptions, is it wrong to discuss it? For instance, there are plenty of creationists who believe that the world is only 6,000 years old. Now, I'm not saying that you're one of them, but is it wrong to use science to show that they are wrong? I would really like to hear your honest opinion on this.
Equally ridiculous is his claim that scientists welcome skepticism. Do they indeed? So do those scientists who advocate man-made climate change welcome those who deny their claims? Try telling that to Professor Ian Plimer, the Australian geologist who has been subjected to vitriolic abuse for denying that man-made climate change is a reality.
But scientists do welcome skepticism, and I stand by my claim that science requires skepticism to progress. But perhaps we're using different definitions of skepticism here. So, just to clear things up, I will quote directly from Wikipedia. Skepticism is an approach to accepting, rejecting, or suspending judgment on new information that requires new information to be well supported by evidence. Now, that's what's key here. Evidence-based skepticism. Now, Wikipedia then goes on to say that considering the rigor of scientific method, science itself may simply be thought of as an organized form of skepticism. As for Ian Plimer, considering he is the director of 3 mining companies, it's really no surprise that he has strongly opposed the idea of man-made climate change. Another fun fact about Plimer is that he is a staunch critic of creationism, which reminds me, what exactly are your views on creationism? Now, I realize you are anti-evolution and that you are a strong proponent of a biblical-based creation event, but what exactly is your stance on it, if you don't mind me asking?
Concerning the fossil record, SwissTopper contradicts himself. One minute he is saying that fossilization is a rare event, and then the next minute he is saying that there are very many human fossils. Both of these statements can't be true, a self-evident fact which clearly escapes SwissTopper.
Wrong, it's not a contradiction. Think of it this way, winning the lottery is a very rare event, and yet it still happens every week. For an individual, the chance of fossilization, or winning the lottery, is very slim, but over long periods of time it can happen enough that it'll get noticed. Just to recap, the chances of an individual Homo sapien getting fossilized, very slim. But as you pointed out, since there were millions of individuals over 200,000 years, it can still happen enough that we'll find fossils today.
The remains for Neanderthal man are far more numerous than the few poor relics that we have for Homo sapiens. Even for the period to which I am referring, the last 200,000 years.
Look, I'm sorry, but could you please post some sources for that statement? I did a brief cursory search and couldn't find anything to either support or refute what you were saying. Now, I'm not saying you're wrong here, I just want to know where you got your data from.
SwissTopper ducks this issue, though, by going on about lifestyle and burial practices, perhaps affecting the number of fossil remains that we find. But how people lived is irrelevant in this context. And if they were buried, then their remains should be there to be found.
Do you actually have any idea how fossilization occurs? Judging from your previous comment, I really don't think so. Firstly, how people lived is extremely relative. The environment in which you live and obviously die in plays a huge role in whether or not you be fossilized. Fossilization requires the body to be rapidly covered by sediment. Now, if you live in the open grassland, like Homo sapiens for instance, then it is extremely unlikely that you'll become fossilized. If you're not buried, your body is going to get eaten by scavengers, and your bones are going to be scattered and they too will slowly decay. But let's suppose that Homo sapiens did practice ritual burial of their dead, an act that is actually thought to have begun about 200,000 years ago. Burial in loose soil does not produce fossilization because the body is still exposed to enough air that it rapidly breaks down, well before the soil has a chance to turn into sedimentary rock. So yes, lifestyle does play a huge role on fossilization.
SwissTopper would only have an answer to my point if he could prove that our primitive ancestors generally practiced cremation, which of course he cannot do.
Actually, regarding cremation, the Mungo Man specimens that you so frequently like to bring up do show evidence of cremation.
SwissTopper concludes his video by alleging that there is little to distinguish us from the chimpanzees, which only goes to show that he is incapable of seeing the bigger picture.
In my video, I tried to explain to you how if you simply compare chimps to humans, you are obviously going to see lots of differences. But if you broaden your horizons just a little and see the multitude and variety of life abundant on this planet, you will see just how similar we really are. Consider all the different plants and animals that share our planet. Now consider the vast differences between our anatomies, and then perhaps you'll start to grasp just how similar we are to apes. This similarity is shown in stunning detail in our shared genetic heritage.
The chimpanzees have remained in the treetops, but man has quite literally ascended to the heavens. This strikes me as rather a significant difference, but obviously one that SwissTopper hasn't got sufficient vision to appreciate.
Yes, humans and chimps are culturally different, and this difference may seem profound, but it actually stems from very small changes, namely that of having a sophisticated language, which has allowed us to develop and pass on complicated ideas, such as reading and writing, which in turn has allowed for further cultural changes. Physiologically and psychologically, we are, however, very similar, almost identical. Anyway, Atticana, I hope you accept my apology, and I hope that you will address the questions that I've raised in this video, and most of all, I hope you keep learning.